As the 112th Congress convenes tomorrow, Republicans will take control of the House and claim more seats in the Senate. House Republicans will use their majority in three ways. They will hold a vote to repeal the new health care law, then try to starve it by cutting off the money. They plan to slash government spending, threatening to cut off the government's ability to borrow money. And they plan to hold hearings and investigations on President Obama's policies and programs. Joining me now is Virginia's 6th District Congressman, Republican Bob Goodlatte. He was first elected in 1992 and begins his 10th term tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.
Bob, good to be with you and your viewers.
Now, a vote to repeal the health care law will be held.
Next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
That's already set on the calendar, and I believe it will pass, and it will pass by a much bigger margin than the original legislation was passed in the last Congress. There will be, I think, virtually every Republican and quite a few Democrats who will join us in trying to repeal it. Then, of course, it goes to the Senate, where we have the Democrats still in the majority there, and we'll see what they do.
Right. So as you mentioned, it doesn't seem likely to pass in the Senate with the Democrats in control. But how will Republicans try to starve it by cutting off the money?
Well, lots of the aspects of this legislation will be taking effect at various times over the next 3 to 4 years. And as that occurs, we will attempt to deprive it of the funds. Now, of course, there'll be another election in 2 years. There may be a different Senate. There may be a different president. And if it all comes together that there's consensus on repealing this legislation and replacing it with the kind of common sense reforms that don't cost the taxpayers a lot of money and that are things that they want, like medical liability reform, allowing people to purchase insurance across state lines, or several reforms like that, that I think there would be bipartisan and, quite frankly, very broad public support for those kind of changes. We'll be pushing to replace the current legislation with those kind of changes.
Now, it's also said House Republicans plan to slash government spending, threatening to cut off the government's ability to borrow money. So this is a big push against the, well, some would say budget excesses of the recent years.
Well, we are going to have several as the new Speaker of the House calls it, adult moments here in the next several months as the Congress and the President have to work their way through the fact that the federal government spending is totally out of control and needs to be cut back. The first is, before that debt limit has to be increased, we're going to reach a point where the funding of the federal government has to be agreed upon. That'll occur sometime in February, and we would like to roll back government spending initially to 2008 levels. That would save initially about $100 billion. That's really only a start, in my opinion, but it's more than what the President wants to do. So that'll be the first confrontation.
And is that the threat is that, well, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling if we don't roll it back to 2008? Is that where the threat comes in?
That'll come a little later, when we have to have a vote to authorize the federal government to borrow more money, since the government's spending is out of balance, and as long as it stays out of balance, that debt limit has to periodically be increased. But before I think the House of Representatives will agree to do that, we're going to have some major concessions about further spending cuts and about long-term plans to get the federal government discipline under control. That's where my balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution could come into play. I'll certainly be pushing for that as one of the things that we want to have before we proceed to borrow more money.
And Congress just agreed before Christmas to extend unemployment benefits and cut Social Security taxes. Did you agree with those policies?
I agreed with extending the overall tax cuts. There were a couple of things in there
that all
that
part of the package,
I would have had done differently.
Well, for instance, the unemployment benefits, should those have been extended?
Well, the unemployment benefits should be reformed. 99 weeks of unemployment benefits is something that we simply cannot afford. There are many employers who are looking for workers and claim that there are people who are not going back to work as long as they can continue to draw unemployment benefits. Whether or not that's true, I think that we need to have reforms to the unemployment benefit program.
All right, very good. Congressman Bob Goodlatte, representing Virginia's 6th District. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bob.